That's why we're going to bring in our all-stars. We have Mark Simone, WOR radio show host and 2023 Radio Hall of Fame nominee. We have Joe Concha, columnist at The Messenger, Fox News contributor. And we have Charlie Hurt, opinion editor of The Washington Times and a Fox News contributor. Charlie Hurt, you're the furthest away, so I'm going to start with you, okay? I have to talk a little more loudly because you're so far away. Am I too hard on them? I mean, there were some good moments. I just didn't feel like they felt it. I don't really think they made the case. I don't really think they did the MAGA thing. I was dying for a good MAGA, Charlie. Not one good MAGA in 2 hours. Anyway, tell me what Charlie Hurt thinks.
Well, of course, this is the problem for all of them because the best guy at prosecuting the MAGA agenda wasn't there, and you know, so you couldn't sort of get beyond the sense that they're all kind of running to be the assistant to the MAGA chief, which is not a bad thing. I thought the debate was it was highly entertaining. I thought it was highly revealing. Just from the shooting from the hip, I would say that Vivek Ramaswamy probably did himself the most good, just because if you look at Google searches, for example, last night, the #1 Google search last night was, "Who is this Vivek Ramaswamy guy?" I thought that on a couple of issues, a couple of people had their sort of high points as well. But I thought that by virtue, Ron DeSantis, this was sort of his moment to demonstrate that he really can take his successes that he's had in Florida and use that to win over people outside of Florida. And because he didn't mop the floor with anybody last night, I think that he probably did himself the least amount of good.
Yeah, I think you're probably right about that. Joe Concha, what do you think?
I see Washington Post, 538, has a new poll out who won the debate last night. Ron DeSantis was the winner, according to this poll.
Interesting.
But he didn't blow away the numbers. In other words, 29% have DeSantis.
Tell me about this. I haven't seen this poll.
It's fairly new. 29% DeSantis, 26% Vivek Ramaswamy, 15% Nikki Haley, who I think performed better than most people thought she would, particularly taking on Pence as far as saying you don't have 60 votes in the Senate to federalize abortion, so why even talking about it? That was her strongest moment. If this was an audition for vice president, then I think Vivek Ramaswamy certainly made an impression on the president, because the president was actually tweeting, or whatever you call it, on True Social, saying very positive things about Vivek Ramaswamy, because Ramaswamy said that he was the best president of the 21st century. So that's a nice way to do that audition. And Tim Scott, even though he didn't have the great impact, I don't think he ever will, because he's such an optimistic, nice guy. But as far as vice president, Vivek, Tim Scott, those are my top two picks right now as far as who Trump would choose if Trump is the nominee. And as you said, big lead right now. That's what it looks like, but we still got 5 months to
You wanted Trump to be at the debate.
Yes, I did.
You're a hard-hitting candidate. You call him a coward.
Well...
Did you call him a coward? Somebody told me. I didn't actually read the column.
Right. The column basically says that Donald Trump shouldn't have looked at this as, okay, I'm leading in the race for the nomination by all these points. He should be talking about the general election. He should have used this platform and all the millions that were watching last night to reach an audience that is comprised of suburban women or disgruntled Democrats or Hispanics. A lot more people than just Republicans and conservatives were watching that debate last night, and that was his chance to reintroduce himself to those folks that he needs, that he had in 2016 to win in places like Pennsylvania, Wisconsin.
Well, that's an interesting point. That's an interesting point. Mark Simone, I want to get your take on it. I just want to I want to qualify my question, because of those on that debate stage, I'm not entirely convinced they made a really strong case against Joe Biden. Now, I'm against Joe Biden. I don't agree with Joe Biden's policies. That's not a secret. But I'm not sure they got the job done. I think if Donald Trump had been on that stage, he would have made a terrific case against Joe Biden. I think there were snippets, as I tried to describe in my opening riff. I didn't describe every snippet, but each one of them, most of them. Chris Christie didn't have any good snippets, and neither did Asa Hutchinson, but the others had decent snippets. But, I mean, maybe Trump should have been on that stage.
No.
What do you think?
No, absolutely.
No.
He's a giant. You can't see him sitting at the kiddie table. He doesn't belong there. It's
the children's table.
The children's table. It's the junior varsity. He should not have been there. Vivek Ramaswamy had a big night. You basically had two debates going on there. You had the MAGA debate. Ramaswamy impressed them. You had the donor debate. They seemed to like Nikki Haley. She was scoring points with them.
Ooh.
And as you know, whoever the donors get behind, they're always going to lose. The fact that Christie and everybody kept going after Ramaswamy elevated his status, made him look really important. And he had a couple of brilliant comebacks against Chris Christie that I think a lot of the audience missed. You remember when he said, well, you're just another Obama? And under the applause, you could hear him say, you hugged Obama and then he won. Could you hug me right now, too? Very quick on his feet. Mike Pence, I think, was battling DeSantis to be the more sanctimonious, and I think he accomplished that.
Oh, jeez.
DeSantis, I think the problem with him, you could see the awkwardness. He was just awkward on camera.
Charlie Hurt, why? Look, DeSantis had, as I said in my riff, I like DeSantis talking about how he fired some local prosecutors. I just like that. It's a good policy. I also thought DeSantis had a very good response on education. But for some reason, Charlie, I don't know what it is. Maybe you can help me on this. He doesn't project. He doesn't get it out there. He didn't really make his mark. I think for him to have gone up in the polls a lot, he needed to make his mark last night, Charlie Hurt. And I don't think he did. And I want you to explain to me why. He's a smart guy. He's a definite conservative guy. Why can't he make his mark? What's up with that? What's wrong with him?
So it's really interesting, Larry. If you look at everybody on that stage last night, nobody has a stronger record of conservative, MAGA accomplishments than Ron DeSantis does on that stage last night. And yet, for some reason, he's just incapable of closing the deal with voters. And you know, you can sit here and criticize this and say, well, that's a stupid way to pick a president, whether or not the guy is able to connect with people through a television screen and get them to. But that's the way, that's how we pick presidents in this country. You have to be able to do this. And he has this wonderful agenda. And when you go to Florida and you talk to people in Florida who love Ron DeSantis, and they can tell you in personal ways that he has improved their lives. Now, that's great. But when you go to Iowa or New Hampshire, South Carolina or Milwaukee, you have to be able to make that argument and transfer it from what people feel on the ground in Florida, so that people who have not yet lived under your governorship can feel it. And he can't do it. He just, I don't know what it is about him. And when you build these candidates, and like Mark just said about, you know, anytime the donor class builds a Frankenstein candidate, they always fail.
That's the kiss
well,
of death.
it's the same is true about political experts. When they build their Frankenstein candidate, they always lose. You've got to win the election.
Well, the guy with charisma is Vivek Ramaswamy. By the way, Vivek's going to be on this show in just a little bit, so we're going to talk to him firsthand. He's got a lot of charisma. Joe Concha, Vivek was the guy who defended Trump. Now, he does have charisma. He's a very good communicator. He's a very smart young man. We've had him on the show many times. I know him rather well. He spoke to our committee to Unleash Prosperity dinner a few weeks back. He did extremely well on that. I happen to agree with him on most of the issues, I think. How forceful is he going to be? I mean, does he propel himself now? I know you're, what is it, 528, 538?
538, yeah.
Washington Post. I don't want to degrade any poll, but anyway, Vivek did himself a lot of good last night. Where's this going to lead?
It's going to keep going up, because when you look about when he announced earlier this year, he was at 0%. Then he was at 1, then he was at 4, then 7. Now he's in double digits. Slowly but surely, he is gaining momentum because he is seen, just like Trump is, a consummate outsider. This is a guy, he's one of the youngest billionaires in the country. And it's not like it was handed to him, it's all self-made. So if you talk to Trump supporters, they don't want somebody from the swamp or somebody who they see as establishment. If they see another guy who made his money in the private sector, who has the passion that Vivek Ramaswamy does, he's 38 years old. I don't think it really matters all that much. John F. Kennedy was, 42 when he ran for president, so you're really going to make a big difference there. I think overall, look, to answer your question, by the way, why didn't any of Trump's opponents use the MAGA slogan? Well, because Trump is the opponent. So they're not going to be like, hey, I'm going to hijack that for me,
Vivek
too.
comes I mean, Vivek defended Trump and sounded like Trump. which is very interesting to me.
And I don't think it's an act so much. And just one point on what Charlie said before, it does matter to connect with voters through a camera, through TV. We saw that with John F. Kennedy back in 1960, where when people listened to his debate against Richard Nixon on the radio, everybody thought Nixon won. And then they watched it on television, and then they thought that Kennedy won because he was just the more charismatic guy and didn't sweat like Nixon did, by the way, under the hot lights. But it does matter to a certain extent, performance, yes.
No, I agree. But Mark, you know, it's interesting. There's horse race stuff and there's issue stuff. And I think Vivek really scored heavily on issues. I mean, look at Vivek smashed climate change, okay? I'm not saying the others are in favor of Biden's climate change, but Vivek seemed to nail it more than the others did. Vivek also really came out against the Ukraine-Russian war and the financing of that war. Now, the Republican Party is going to be badly split about it. Nikki Haley defended the war. Mike Pence defended the war. DeSantis didn't have a position on the war. I mean, DeSantis, by the way, when they looked around, what was the thing? He was afraid to raise his hand to defend Trump. And then he looked around at both sides, and then he finally raised it. I mean, that could have buried him right there. But I'm just saying, on the issues, Vivek is scoring heavily. He's a good communicator, Charlie's suggesting. But he's all, as Joe is suggesting, but he's also Trumpian on the issues.
And he's got the greatest smile. His dentist was the big winner last night. But
Oh, no.
he's got an incredible smile. You could say, well, he's too much of a salesman, but he's got substance. He can back it up. Now, you argue he's too young. DeSantis is too young. He's 44. He should have waited 10 years. You remember Trump, they pushed him to run in his 30s, in his 40s, in his 50s. He waited till he had a lot of seasoning, and that's what those guys should have waited for. Vivek had a big night.
Charlie Hurt, does this change the race at all? I mean, I've said, to me, the race doesn't change. I ask you, though, does the race change?
I think it changes in one very dramatic way. I think that Ron DeSantis had to have a different night last night, and he didn't. And so the challenger, and I think we'll see his poll numbers continue to sort of slip. And Vivek Ramaswamy is sort of the person, you know, the person most likely to sort of pick up from Ron DeSantis's disappointment.
Yeah, you didn't mention the former governor of New Jersey, Charlie Hurt.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he was there for the booze, apparently, and boy, did he get them. I mean, he was like a pig in a trough of booze. Wow. Just at every turn, he was getting booed. And he did really good. He was really good at that.
I'm a Jersey guy. He left office with 14% approval in my state.
That's after he closed the George Washington Bridge. Remember that?
Yeah.
You mentioned that.
Go to Fort Lee, which has great bagels. Why you would do that?
That's right.
I think he was running for a friar's roast. That's
He got as many boos as the New York Yankees cleanup hitter, and we'll leave it at that.
Wow.
Mark Simone, Joe Concha, and Charlie Hurt, thank you.